Hey guys, welcome back. In this video we're making these beautiful little wire wrapped crystal balls. These are different to our normal designs where instead of using wire we're using jump rings to make this little cube shaped cage to hold our crystal balls secure. It is actually quite a simple design where we attach 6 16mm jump rings together to form a cage and then secure them with these little wire connections. We've also made a little wire hook for the top, or you could just hang it by another jump ring. Now we've got our 6 16mm jump rings here. You can see they are just over that 15mm mark, but you can adjust the size of your jump rings depending on the size of your crystal ball. The crystal balls I'm using today are about 2 centimeters wide or 20mm wide. So your jump rings need to be smaller than your crystal ball so it doesn't fall through, and you also need to fit 4 jump rings right around the crystal ball. I'm going to wrap one of these green aventurine crystals today so it's easy to see the wire. Now we're going to make a little cage with our jump rings and then wrap it around the crystal ball. So to start with, I just lay my jump rings out with 4 down and then 1 on either side as well. And we're going to wrap this together and then we can bring it around to hold that crystal secure. Now for connecting these jump rings together, we use 24 gauge wire. So we're going to need about 12 connections. So I just cut 12 1.5 inch lengths of this 24 gauge wire. This is a nice thin bendy wire. It's great for wrapping around to make the connections, and when we make the hook for the top we will use 20 gauge wire. So to start with, we're just going to attach 2 jump rings together. So grabbing your 2 jump rings and one of the 1.5 inch lengths of wire. Now we just bring this piece of wire around both jump rings where they touch together. Wrapping this piece of wire around a couple of times through those jump rings, keeping those jump rings nice and close together but sitting next to each other, and keeping this wire quite tight as you go. So we want all our connections to be exactly the same, so I try and bring my wire around to form 4 full loops around. And then I cut all the wires on one side as well, so I can keep all those ends on the inside of my wire wrap. Pulling those ends tight as well and making sure that those loops are crimped together nice and tidy. Once you've done your 4 loops around and those ends are both on the same side, then you can cut them nice and short and crimp them down tight so they're tidy and there's no sharp edges. I take my time on each connection, just making sure it's nice and tidy and tight before I head on to the next one. Once you're happy with it, then we can move on to the next jump ring. So grabbing our next little piece of wire and the next jump ring, still working towards having that sort of cross shape with the 4 in the center and the 1 on each side. So now we just repeat that same process, bringing this wire around where the 2 jump rings touch, wrapping it around those 4 times around to keep it nice and tidy and matching all the other connections. You want to make sure each loop is sitting nice and flat and next to each other, and that the jump rings are sitting next to each other as well. Then when you're done with your loops, making sure that the ends of the wire sit on what will be the inside of your wire wrap, so keeping them all on the one side. Cutting those wires off nice and short and crimping them down tight and tidy. It does take a bit of time and patience, this wire wrap, but it is worth it in the end, so just trust the process. So that's 3 of our jump rings connected. We're just going to go ahead now and connect all 6 of our jump rings, making sure to wrap them together so they stack 4 high and then 1 on each side.
Alright,
So I just went ahead and attached all 6 of our jump rings now. So long as yours is connected in a similar way, then you should be able to just place your crystal ball inside one of the center rings and then bring the other jump rings in your wrap around the crystal ball. So you can see how my jump rings meet up now on this top part. So my next connection I place is going to be these 2 here. So grabbing another piece of wire and wrapping it around these jump rings where they touch together. It is a little bit harder to wrap around once you've got the crystal ball inside, but just take your time bending your wire around to create a nice secure connection between the 2 jump rings. Making sure it's the same amount of loops and keeping them nice and flat and tidy. I find I can just use my pliers to sort of bend that wire and tuck it underneath, and that way you can just kind of wrap it around nice and tight and tidy, just taking your time to create that nice secure wire wrap. Once you've got this connector with all your wire wrapped around nice and tight, then you can cut your tails off. So just make sure you cut them in a way that you can tuck that little end underneath inside the wire wrap so it looks nice and tidy. Making sure to crimp everything nice and tight before you move on to the next connection. It can be a little hard holding all these jump rings into place, but the more connections you do, the easier it will stay in place. Now we're just going to work our way around the whole crystal ball. Now every single point where those jump rings touch, we need to put a connection. It doesn't matter what order you do them in now, but each jump ring should have 4 connections on it, so 1 on each side. So just work your way around the whole crystal ball now, making sure all those ends are pulled in tight, all the connections look the same, and the ends are tucked in underneath before you move on to the next connection. Okay, so once you've got a connection on every single part where the jump rings are touching, then this is optional, but I like to go and just put a little dab of the hypo cement jewelry glue onto each connection. I guess it depends on if you're going to be wearing this as a pendant or if it's just going to hang somewhere, but I like to know that my wire wraps are really nice and secure so they're not going to come undone and I won't lose the crystal. So just placing a little drop of glue onto each connection, and that will keep it nice and secure. You want to make sure that your ball can still spin freely inside your wire wrap. So just give it a spin and make sure it's not sticking anywhere. Now while that glue is still drying, it's a good time to just go over your whole wire wrap with your pliers, just making sure everything's sitting nicely and all your ends of wire are tucked under neatly. Now, if you want to place a little hook like this one here, I'm going to show you how to do that now. If you wanted to though, you could just place another jump ring underneath part of the wire wrap to hang it from that. But to make a hook, I just use 2 inches of 20 gauge silver wire. Now holding it just off the center, we bring the wire around our round nose pliers and across the other wire, forming a loop there. Then grabbing it just on the other side, bringing that other end around so that the ends cross over in the center and you've got a loop on each end. Once you've got that loop on each end, then we can grab it with our pliers. And then we're going to bring one of the tails back around that center wire. So gently bending it back around so that we can cut that tail off and crimp it down around that centre wire securely. So crimping that down tight so there's no sharp edges. Now with the other loop that's not secured yet, we gently bend that open so that I can slide it underneath some of the jump rings. So I just slide it under two that are sort of connected there, and then it's going to hang sort of evenly. You could place it under just one if you wanted to, but I think it's more secure under two. Once your crystal's hanging inside that loop there, we're going to bring this tail back around itself. Gently bending it around. And then we can cut it nice and short and crimp it in tight so there's no sharp edges. Now you can take some extra time with your pliers, just making sure everything's crimped in nice and tight and secure, and that things are sitting straight and how you want them. So there's your beautiful wire wrapped crystal ball.